The Houston Cougars know they have the LSU Tigers in the Texas Bowl this weekend, but who the Tigers are lining up is a much bigger question.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Please make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs and bearing with us through some technical difficulties. We'll join the conversation down below. And if you don't know what to say, tell us if, when, and where you're going anywhere this holiday season. We're bouncing around some here at Locked On Cougs, so that's obviously throwing things for a little bit of a loop. But happy to bring you today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best place to get in on the action and get there in person. But more on all of that fun later. I want to talk about who LSU will look like this upcoming weekend as Houston plays LSU in the Texas Bowl. That's going to be our first segment. We'll talk about exactly who that could be. Second segment, I want to talk about what bowl practices are bringing, including some like changes in the coaching staff for Houston and what that is shaping up to look like and what to expect out of that. Last but not least, a couple of positive surprises in the depth chart as Houston heads into the bowl game, with the first depth chart being released yesterday on Monday. But let's get into that LSU depth chart because that's got a lot of question marks around it. Now, if you've been under a rock or just don't care about LSU or anything outside of the University of Houston, their entire shtick, everything's gone around them, right? The new coaching staff comes in and replaces Ryan Kelly with Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. Some coaches came with them, some did not. Players are hitting the portal, players in and out. The whole thing is turning over. And Houston's catching LSU, a team with a lot of, admittedly, like recruited talent. I don't mean to say there's no talented football players on that roster, but they don't have a lot of guys that play like into them this year left because of people hitting the portal, leaving, opting out for pros, Senior Bowl, etc. The most impactful of which is probably senior quarterback, or redshirt sophomore quarterback. Reading my notes here wrong. Michael Van Buren, and he's going to be backed up by Emil Picarella. I'm not sure that Picarella has played much at all, but Van Buren came in late in the season in a pinch once other guys were injured. Van Buren, that's a redshirt sophomore. He started 8 games at Mississippi State before coming to LSU, and he was actually an Oregon commit for most of his senior year of high school before ultimately recommitting to Mississippi State. He's thrown just 125 passes this year as a quarterback at LSU. The most action he saw were between the Arkansas and Western Kentucky games. If you look at PFF grades, his best game was at Arkansas. He actually ran the ball pretty well there. He did have over 5 yards per rush as a quarterback this year, and I wonder if that may be more where he plays a factor in this football game. But there's such a small sample. He only rushed 26 times on the entire season. It's hard to exactly get a feel for what kind of a scheme they're going to have. Especially when we talk about like their offensive line's going to be a little bit different looking later too. I'm not exactly sure where to go with it. He is practicing as the starting quarterback, though. Been back and forth with Matt Moscona over at Locked On LSU, and he's the guy that's going to get the call or has gotten the call there. The other probably more interesting thing, we mentioned that Van Buren may be running the ball some, is true freshman running back Harlem Berry is still with the program and looks like he figures to be the starting running back in this football game for LSU. He did have 5 games this year with over 10 carries. He had about 4.5 yards per carry, but just a couple touchdowns. He also played well in that Arkansas game. So you're trying to get a scout look. I'd say go break down LSU and Arkansas because both of those backfield guys were pretty big factors there. But the biggest question about Harlem Berry is not if he can play. The guy's a really good running back. But with all of the turnover, many, myself included, are a little surprised he's coming back to LSU and is going to be the person Houston has to play against on Saturday. When Lane Kiffin came into LSU from Ole Miss, everyone kind of assumed he was going to be bringing star All-SEC running back Keisean Lacey over. And it sounds like there may be something going on there still. LSU has hired the Ole Miss running back coach, but that coach is kind of splitting time presently between LSU and Ole Miss going back and forth some. Um, and so with that running back coach splitting time, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where the focus of him would be, right? I don't think he'll be working the bowl game. Lane Kiffin has said up front he's not coaching the bowl game. He's going to let the interim staff that is still there finish out the job they've started. He says that in a deferential kind of way, but with Lane Kiffin, I guess you can't ever really tell. But I think the assumption was that once Lane Kiffin showed up and brought his own running back crew with him, he'd also be bringing Kawan Lacey, and Lacey is still at Ole Miss, and so there is some, whispering around Lacey deciding to hit the transfer portal after the playoffs are over. You may see Harlem Berry sit out. If that does not come between now and the bowl game, I assume he'll play. And frankly, I could also see why Lane Kiffin would want to have Harlem Berry play and stay at LSU. And so maybe the desire for a Kewan Lacey is not quite as big. Either way, Harlem Berry is a very good, true freshman running back. Van Buren has played very little at quarterback. I do think, though, that between his own running ability and Harlem Barron's running ability, this is a football team that will be focusing on running the football and trying to win an ugly bowl game. Their offensive line looks very different. Looks like they're going to start, according to our Locked On LSU folks, Tyree Adams, Cohen Eccles, Brian Moore, Paul Mabenga, and Weston Davis. That's not the starting lineup they had for a large portion of the season. That's the starting lineup they're going to have on the offensive line. It looks like going into the bowl game. Some notable departures there. Their defense, fairly similar. Aaron Anderson, Montre Delante, Frank Wilson, AJ Haulcy, Harold Perkins, like all these guys. AJ Haulcy is the name. Yes, same AJ Haulcy. All out for various reasons. Haulcy is an interesting one. Haulcy, obviously, if you are new to the program and the show, Haulcy was an all Big 12 safety at Houston. Played last spring in the system that Houston brought in with new defense coordinator Austin Armstrong, and opted out in the transfer portal after the spring game was over, and ended up at LSU. And all of that, I think a lot of us, myself included, thought he was going to Miami and then Keontae Davis ultimately, or Keontae obviously went to Miami, and Haulcy went to LSU. I say that to say that I think Haulcy has accepted Senior Bowl bid. He is going pro. He is doing all those things. He may not have wanted to play in the bowl game regardless. I really think once it was the Texas Bowl versus Houston, he really was not going to play in this bowl game. I don't mean to put too many people's business out there. I think guys in the program still really like AJ and vice versa. They understand, like, at some level, this feels like a business, and that's the way that goes. And so I think Haulcy opted out for a lot of reasons, but I think Houston being the opponent certainly was one of them. LSU on the whole is losing, it looks like, about 10 guys with over 700 snaps played this season, Haulcy being one of the more impactful ones. And that does change, it looks like, what they're going to do. Now, they still have Jordan Gilbert, who's a hybrid type. They call him the star position on defense. The defensive line still looks relatively solid. LSU has always had incredibly talented players on their roster. I don't say any of this to say Houston can just look past LSU because they have an inexperienced set of guys going out there to play this the bowl game, or because Houston somehow has upper hand at a bunch of positions. I think Houston's good, and Houston bringing back a lot of their guys, as we'll talk about at the end of the episode, will help them. It's really hard to scout this team, though, and see what tendencies are for players or things like that, or what kind of an offense you're going to call around Michael Van Buren being the starter when they have so little of that on video. Right now, Van Buren did replace Grant Nussmeier at LSU, and I think it was halftime of that Arkansas game. It might have been the game before that of Alabama. And he has thrown a couple picks this season. You can kind of get some reads on what his tendencies are there. But ultimately, it was also an offense that was not designed for him. He started the season as the third string guy, actually, right? And so, like, what does it look like when he's had some time to really prepare and put in stuff for him? Bluntly, offensive interim staff, people that have been around for a while, kind of using this as a chance, your last chance to show off in a lot of ways, right before leaving LSU. So they're going to look a lot different, and I am excited to see what they look like. We're looking to crossover with Matt from Locked On LSU later to get more insights to you there, but excited for that one, especially with Houston getting their own bowl practice underway. a lot of new faces on the field for Houston. I want to talk about what that looks like for the Cougs in just 1 second. But today's show is brought to you by Brothers over at Game Time. There's nothing like college football season, and the playoffs are here, bowl season's here, tailgates, packed stadiums, fun trips, just all make such a unique experience and time of year. Energy, bands, momentum, you'll remember forever. That's what Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. You got to get on that, even if the hardest part has previously been things like sitting in long lines, queues, checkouts, logins, prices jumping. Game Time fixes all of that. Game Time app helps you get into college football games right away. Last minute tickets, great deals, zone deals. Look, I can tell you from experience, it makes for a great gift if you're trying to give someone something with this holiday season as well. Game Time gives you a very affordable option to get people in on the action, to get guesswork out of buying college football tickets. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code Locked On College for $20 off. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here. And thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Sports Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you have not checked out the Everydayer Club, lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer, and the all access options available for Locked On Cougs, I'm telling you, you're missing out. We got some recruiting news and notes in there right now on the basketball side of things as well. It's lockedoncougs.supercast.com to find out more about the program across all Locked On shows. You can lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Ad-free audio episodes, members only Locked On Discord, special all access episodes, one-on-one texting with me. Go to lockedoncougs.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn much more. I mentioned that there's some new faces at bowl practice. Obviously, the heralded class, the much talked about class of 2026 at the University of Houston, the greatest recruiting class in school history in terms of football, is actually 13 players are on campus. Like it is a large number of that already on campus and practicing. I want to stress those guys are ineligible to play for the bowls. They're not playing the bowl game this week. They are just already practicing as their early enrollees and things like that, but they were not members of the team last season. It does sound like, though, that you're kind of getting a look at what those guys can do. Keisean Henderson is already taking reps at quarterback as the #1 kid in the entire class nationally. Paris Melvin has already played 2 days into practice 3 different positions. While he was a higher-rated athlete and could play corner, could play receiver, could play returner, I would put money on him playing 2 or 3 over the course of his time at Houston. He is that talented. He's getting work at all of them. And it's not just the fun, skinny guys. It's also big bodies, Zay Fleming and stuff like that, like kind of getting in the action as well, getting their feet wet in college football. That's the importance of the bowl game. We talked about Houston made bowl eligibility pretty early on in the season, that you get this extra month of practice and your early enrollees get an early look at Houston practices, and your veterans, get another month to develop, and all. It's all very helpful. What has proven to also be helpful with, though, is that the coaching staff, it's not going the same kind of changes they've had the last couple of years, right? You went from the Holgerson staff to the Fritz staff. That was a complete overhaul, the exception of the offensive line coach. Last year, you had to replace both coordinators. This year, you are replacing a pair of position coaches that I would point out, right, are losses. And I think there's some discussion about which one's more of a loss. And I don't necessarily need to weigh them out, but I can tell you right now, you talk to players in this team, both position coaches will be lost and will be felt. But I think they're actually in good position to build both back up. The first coach, Derek Sherman, the wide receivers coach, he recently just took a new job with Iowa State. He'll be replaced by Brian Bell, who was previously an offensive analyst on the staff. It sounds like Bishop will be, we mentioned last week that Bishop is coming in to help with the staff, coming out of the high school ranks, helping Houston on the offensive front. It sounds like he'll be actually transitioning to the wide receiver room, kind of helping gel the two. Now, Brian Bell and Michael Bishop are both former quarterbacks. Brian Bell played at Baylor. Brian Bell. I got the wrong Bell brother. Brian Bell played for Willie Fritz at Sam Houston. His brother played at Baylor. But when Brian Bell was at Sam Houston, he graduated the all-time program passing leader. He also GA'd at Georgia Southern for Fritz there, so he's known in the Fritz system for a while. He was a wide receivers like assistant last year, but really was an offensive analyst by title. And Brian Bell has great recruiting ties to Central and North Texas from his time at China Spring. You added Michael Bishop there with the recruiting ties he has the greater Houston area. Frankly, you just recruit Bishop's family. You had a pretty good set of athletes all around. But recruiting ties to the Houston area, both guys have played quarterbacks. You understand the wide receiver from the quarterback lens. Those are all really, really good. Sherman had been a player's coach. Players loved Sherman. I don't mean to say that there's not a loss there. There's a reason Fritz brought him from Tulane with him, right? But I do think it's not a gigantic. It's a loss in terms of personality. I don't think it's a big loss in terms of production on the field. Brian Bell will be a great coach for that position group. And Sherman's already moved on. Bell is coaching the wide receivers in this bowl interim period. Now, on the inverse, Josh Christian Young is the cornerbacks coach departing for Kentucky, the DB's coach departing for Kentucky, and going to go join Will Stein's staff there. And Christian Young is helping out through the bowl season. I think that says something about the commitment he wanted to make the program. He showed up, but he's also been a guy that's been with Willie for a couple stops, and has really taken a bigger role. Christian Young did since Zach Etheridge left last spring, about mid-spring. And now you kind of have a whole new look with Marcus Trice coming in as the new second secondary coach. Trice has been at Stephen F. Austin, and while he was at Stephen F. Austin, they actually have coached 5 different defensive backs with some sort of an NFL contract since he coached them. And, obviously some of those are like camp deals or practice play deals. But you got some guys in the league out of Stephen F. Austin, which I think is speaks to making a lot out of your resources if you're there. Before his time at Stephen F. Austin in 2022, he'd been a DC and otherwise assistant coach in a couple different DFW area high schools. Trice is originally from Mesquite, so I think that makes some sense, obviously. And Trice went to Oklahoma out of college, knows the Big 12 from that vantage point, was actually an all-conference player at North Texas in his playing days before he finished college. And look, he's working with P.J. Hall in the defensive backfield. P.J. Hall came in when Etheridge left. P.J. Hall they'll partner on DBs. I could see Hall doing corners and Trice doing safeties or vice versa. I would point out that P.J. Hall did play safety at Tulane under Willie Fritz early in Fritz's time there, and was really excited to get back to work with Fritz, given their relationship. And so I could see Hall doing safeties and Trice doing corners, because Trice was a corner. They've also coached both positions. I don't know that it actually shapes out as the defensive backfield is probably more important. They'll both be echoing the things Austin Armstrong says as the defense coordinator. And I will say again, everyone who's played for Josh Christian Young loves playing for him, right? I also think it speaks volumes that Stephen F. Austin was not looking to lose Marcus Trice. They did not want to lose Marcus Trice. And it probably speaks to JCY's character that he's still, there helping with the bowl game. I don't mean to say anyone else is faulted for not. Everyone's got different things they got to do. Sometimes you got to go set up shop and start rebuilding things at your new place. I know Sherm going to Iowa State means they're also not playing in a bowl game. And so he's got to kind of get to rebuilding, so to speak, up there. Where, Kentucky's in a little bit different spot. Who knows, right? But I think that Houston's going to be okay at that spot as well. Even if JCY and Sherman are both guys the kids love, I think that the new names coming in are great for the program. And ultimately, you only get so many assistants, right? You can't keep everyone. And if you're hiring good assistants, the unfortunate thing is they're going to get higher dollar jobs again later. Now, I see some people online talking about how this is evidence that Nunez and they need to pay more or find more money for assistant coaches and whatever. And I do think that that's all working in progress. I would also point out that there will always be, even the Ohio States of the world, even the Michigans of the world, even the Notre Dames, everyone's, they all get outbid on position coaches. At some point, you got to draw a line in the sand on what you pay, right? And that happens all the time to everybody. That's part of the nature of the business. And I don't know, no one has said that Sherman or Christian Young is leaving for money. I should probably not put it out there like that. But I do think that at some point, these guys at the position coaches level change all the time. And that if Houston can go through the offseason only losing a couple of position coaches with the replacements they've got for this pair, I think that's actually a really strong offseason in terms of retention. Last year, you lost two coordinators, one by choice, one not. This is a whole different situation. And I think that, last year you were able to replace those guys and go 9-3. You build with those coordinators coming back next year and a whole other set of talent and all that, like things would be moving in the right direction. And I think that's a positive for the program heading into the bowl game. Now, I mentioned heading into the bowl game. We mentioned LSU depth chart, but Houston had some positive surprises of their own. And I want to get into what those were. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at FanDuel, because NFL Sundays, however few there are left, can move really fast. One big play, suddenly everything feels different. That's why you're making live betting so exciting with FanDuel. If you're following along this weekend, you're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time with FanDuel. You can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment can be that much more exciting. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. If a receiver gets hot, defense tighten up, or the momentum flips on a turnover, FanDuel helps you jump in the moment. Now, live spreads and money lines can adjust instantly. Prayer props can change and update as guys heat up. If you want to get right in the middle of the action of the season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Park Rangers locked on Coogs here. And Houston's depth chart is fascinating in that it's really not too changed from a normal game-to-game week. Now, admittedly, I can hear different people pointing out very quickly, the depth chart they put out to start a game week is almost always based off of just who played last game, right? It is not always a declarative statement. There are often injury reports and things like that come out later in the week that will shift things and whatever. But as of recording this podcast, the biggest change in the depth chart is that Houston has moved on from Demetrius Pancake Hunter at center. And we talked about that before. And Pancake's a good kid, and I don't want to twist things or convolute things. And I don't think, anyway, Pancake is not on the roster anymore. Right. And so the biggest change was going to be the interior of the offensive line. The offensive line has a lot of turnover going into next year with people graduating and seniors and all that. And the move they've made has been to move Matt Wyckoff to center and play Mackenzie Agnello at right guard, Jason Queso Brooks at left guard, Ibaselli at left tackle, and Dalton Merriman at right tackle. That's really not a gigantic flip. But what is interesting to me is I feel like we had recently seen Wyckoff playing right guard and Agnello playing center, and they flipped that on the depth chart going into the bowl game. I would also point out that they can both play both. Wyckoff might have a real chance at playing professionally as a center based on his size and speed and those kinds of things. And so this may be more of a spot for him. I'd also point out that both those guys have been listed at backups at different points of the season. And so with Pancake being gone, the new backup, Derek Joyner, is listed as a backup right guard, I believe. And I say that because while he's not listed as the backup center, Mackenzie Agnello would likely come play center if something happened, right? Derek Joyner's a redshirt freshman. I says he's a really, relative to the other people on the offensive line, a really young guy if he were to get in on the action, right? And so interesting things there. That's also kind of the only real change. It sounds like Rashawn Stanford is a couple of weeks away, but will not push it to get in the bowl game. If you remember, he tore his ACL, or tore his knee, I should say, I believe it was the ACL, right before the season started. And he's already kind of getting his feet under him. He would have been a game changer all year. Houston had a great season at 9-3. They might have been a 10-2 team had he been healthy. But he wasn't, and they weren't, and he'll be healthy next season. Sounds like things are progressing well, and I will stress, he's a great kid, and that's a great sign for a great kid to be getting back healthy, but he won't be healthy by the bowl game. You're still going to have Dean Connors. They have his backup as DJ Butler, so still going to have Connor Wegman. You're still going to have Harvey Broussard. You're still going to have a bunch of guys on the defense side. They have Carlos Allen as the starting defensive tackle, Khalil Alfau as the starting defensive tackle, Sienna Fotu, Latrell McCutcheon, etc. The fascinating thing to me is, and I will admit, I was 100% wrong. I did not think this was going to happen. I am really happy I was wrong. Tanner Koziol is listed as a starter and has said, quote, that he never contemplated not playing in the bowl game. He's adamant about that. Playing powerful football when he came out of Ball State was part of the things he wanted to do. And in that media availability, he actually, I thought, said some things that really spoke highly of the program, how he wanted to be the kind of guy that can come back and call Houston home. And you see so many, former players, even that didn't play for Willie, come around the program, see what it's about, and want to be involved and come back and work out and practice and rep with the guys and whatever. And he wants to be one of those guys. And for a guy that just got here at the end of last spring, right? Crazy. And I think it speaks to the culture that a guy like that wants to come back, but also it speaks to Tanner. Tanner has a very bright NFL future ahead of him. Look, whatever you think about his play, every single NFL coach is going to see just the clay. So I can mold that in something if I don't already like what it is. And most people like what it is for what it's worth. And he's going to get to go play in Senior Bowl. He's going to get to go get drafted. He's going to get to go do workouts. He probably gets to go to Indianapolis for the combine, right? And he's like, yeah, but I want to play one more game with my guys. I'm going to go play. And I think that honestly probably meant that most guys, like if Tanner can play with the things he has at risk, I think most guys be hard pressed to not play after that. It has a domino effect. Amare Thomas is listed on the roster as a starter. It sounds like he is practicing. I have seen nothing indicate he would not. Amare's the only other guy I could see because he also has a pro future and all that kind of stuff. I will say it's nice to see him practicing. Other people said he might. There was a fear, I think, from people that he might take that last year of eligibility and transfer. Has been no word on that. Has been no pressure on that. I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think the more likely option is the All Big 12 receiver will jump in the draft, go get drafted, make a bunch of money, playing at the next level. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there, obviously. But I would be more. I think it's more likely that that's what happens. As a whole, if you can keep those guys in the roster in the bowl game, that's a big win, man. It speaks to the culture, it speaks to what you've built, it speaks to what Willie Fritz has built, all that, and gives you a real shot to win this game and get to 10 wins. And getting 10 wins in year 2 of a Power 4 program under Willie Fritz. Year 3, Houston's only been in the Big 12 3 years. This would be 10 wins in your 3rd year in the conference. And yes, BYU joined into this, all that kind of stuff. I get that. Houston had to completely restart when they fired Dana Holgorsen after the first year, right? That the program is where it is it's unfathomable. And I'm the guy that told you last summer I think Houston was in a really good spot and a really friendly schedule. Next year's schedule is also fairly friendly, and they're getting this thing to where it's going to be in an even better spot. I don't know where the ceiling is on this program or where those things are. I don't know that it looks like you can see it from this point. Houston's setting up to have a really, really strong future and has a really, really good chance to win this bowl game. Looking to cross over with Matt Moscano over at Locked On LSU later this week. So hit subscribe and hit the bell so you know when things go live. We also have some news and notes and recruits and things like that in the Everyday All Access Club. So if you want to get more Houston Cougar stuff as often as we can, the holidays are awkward. We're not putting things out every day because it is holiday season. We'll jump back into Big 12 play and obviously get you some stuff right away on that. LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer or LockedOnCougs.supercast.com to get you more Houston Cougars stuff each and every day. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.